And Lakey, from County Durham in northeast England, was having a fantastic time in 2012. After reaching her 50s, she returned to the location she had always called home. David, her third husband, was the love of her life. They were both professors, and they had been married for 20 years, defying predictions that their marriage would fail owing to their age gap. Anne was 34 years old when she married David, who was only 18 years old. Anna, their daughter, is now 19 years old. And received an email that sent shivers down her spine on a regular December Monday morning in 2012. Everything shifted in that split second, and she realized her entire world was crashing around her. At the pinnacle of her career, she had established herself as a go-to authority for improving the performance of underperforming institutions. Lakey was the CEO of the Durham Federation, where she was in charge of 2 secondary schools. For her efforts to promote student achievement in institutions, she was acclaimed as a national education pioneer. She was instrumental in transforming Finedown Community College in Sacriston from a failing institution to one with a stellar reputation. Sir Michael Wilshaw, the Chief Inspector of Schools, commended her as inspiring, and she was mentioned in a leaflet distributed by the Department of Education as a visionary leader. And grew up in the former coal mining town of Stanley with her mother and father, all of whom were teachers, before attending the University of Sheffield to major in history and then complete her teaching training in the city. In 1983, Anna Lakey, aged 23, married Simon Godfrey, a 21-year-old student teacher at the college where she worked. However, for some reason, it did not work out, and they divorced. Anna, on the other hand, didn't stay single for long. By 1987, she was renewing her wedding vows. Anna, 27, married Eamon Toland, 19, a sales assistant. The couple lived in Huddersfield at the time. Anna, on the other hand, yearned to return to Stanley, County Durham, where she had spent her formative years. Eamon was madly in love with Anne, so he agreed to return to be near her. Things changed once they arrived, and their once healthy sex life began to dwindle considerably. Eamon later admitted that they had no sexual interactions during the last 18 months of their relationship. Things weren't right, and she obviously didn't want to be around him, so he took it as a sign. His feelings were hurt since he cared for her. "I had a huge crush on her," he admitted. When he returned home from work one day, he stated, and pulled me into another room and simply announced that our marriage was over. He felt completely hopeless and couldn't figure out what had gone wrong, and hadn't lost her libido since she'd begun a romantic relationship, which Eamon could never have predicted. This was with a 13-year-old pupil at her school, whom Anne had tricked and flattered into the connection. The boy was still in school, even if he wasn't in one of Anne's classes. The victim and a gang of youngsters paid frequent visits to Anne's house. But, over time, the youngster began to appear on his own, and Anne's provocative behavior towards him developed to a dare game in which he was granted permission to touch her chest. He'd watch her from the bathroom window while they talked, and ultimately, Anne made the first move by stripping down on the bed, and things swiftly progressed. In the marriage bed, they had sex. They had sex at least twice a week while Eamon was at work from then on. When Eamon returned home suddenly, and hid him in the wardrobe. The boy ended the relationship because he was afraid of being in a similar circumstance again. Anne wasn't delighted with this development, but she accepted it and asked that he keep it to himself. He questioned why anyone would believe what he said rather than the word of someone so respected. If it hadn't been for the year 2012, it would have been the end of it. Anne, who received a lot of media attention, wrote a mundane blog. She stated in it that her purpose was to give disadvantaged youngsters a solid basis for future success. However, this was read by the boy, now 41, who had a sexual contact with Anne all those years ago. This made him sick to his stomach because of the hypocrisy. He was so outraged after reading it late on a Sunday night that he sent an angry email to her school, denouncing her as a disgusting sexual monster who should be kept away from children. He claimed that having sex with an older lady was exciting at first, but after some time had gone and he had given the experience some consideration, he came to see it for what it truly was and had completely different views about it. He ascribed many of his life's troubles, including run-ins with the authorities and other unpleasant situations, on his time spent with Anne. However, Anne realized that the moment she received the email, her career and life as she knew it were ended, and she felt forced to intervene in order to preserve herself and her loved ones. Anne had intercourse with another teenager around the same time, according to the email she received. And would later admit to their sexual relationship but claimed that they didn't start having sexual contact till he was 18 years old. At the time, she was in her mid-30s. And made the dangerous decision to phone this man after reading his name in the email. She told the detective that the first complainant's email arrived at school late on a Sunday night and that she discovered it the next day. It was sent to her personal email address. The second complainant was named, so she called him the following week. It had been almost 20 years since I'd last seen him. She attempted to express her genuine regret to the second complaint. She explained that she required assistance with several school-related concerns. One of your classmates sent out an email with malicious comments in which your name was mentioned. I just felt strange and embarrassed, and told the detectives that he was being brought into this and that his name had been included in an email. She indicated that she was having difficulties in class, so she forewarned him that someone might be knocking on his door. To be honest, I knew almost nothing about him. Assuming he had a family of his own. I think I felt obligated to warn him. The man who received the call, on the other hand, did not see it that way, and he reported it to authorities, stating that she had told him to cover up the occurrence. The delivery was equivalent to Psychology 101. There was the "my poor father lost my mother" sympathy card at first. Then there's "my husband, my daughter, and my job." On an emotional level, she was hammering into my brain from the start that she hasn't had sex with any other minors since then. There was some flattery at the end. That single phone conversation, he claims, explained everything. After 20 years, someone who hasn't contacted me in over 2 decades thought she could persuade me to lie to the police. Nothing will show you how much she controlled over us lads, he commented. Now. He, too, was in his early 40s, but he appeared genuinely concerned by his ordeal, telling officers that he felt confused and conflicted. His wife later told detectives that she had videotaped him reminiscing about his time with Anne and that he had sobbed while talking about it. He was a broken young man who was easily persuaded. Anne, then 28, and the child, then 15, were on a camping trip when Anne seduced him, and her ex-husband, Eamon, was also present. The court heard that and had openly asked the youngster to join her in her tent, even requesting her husband to wait elsewhere on the field, and that they had their first sex there, in this somewhat bizarre environment. The victim acknowledged that they did it several times over the season. And Lakey denied all charges, claiming she had no sexual contact with the initial accuser. Furthermore, she stated that she did not engage in sexual intercourse with the second complainant until he reached the age of 18. Prosecutor Caroline Goodwin opened the case, describing how 2 now adult males were sexually abused as youngsters by an older, more mature person in a position of trust and responsibility. And Lakey was eventually found guilty on all 13 counts of indecent assault brought against her between 1987 and 1990 and sentenced to 8 years in jail. I was underage, one of the victims said after the verdict. It wasn't as if I was 13 and she was 15. We weren't even born in the same decade. The lady seemed old enough to be my mother. She is said to be an exceptional teacher. I'm not sure what kind of exceptional teacher would engage in sexual activity with a teen. Another of Lakey's victims stated that the attack happened when he was 15 years old and very impressionable. Because of his sexual relationship with Lakey, which he now regrets, he felt cheated out of the time he should have spent connecting with girls his own age. According to Durham Police Detective Inspector Sampson, the boys were sexually molested by a woman in a position of trust and authority. Instead of being traumatized by what transpired, these young men should have felt safe in her presence. whether these lads appear to have participated willingly in the offense. Det insp Samson stated, at the time they may have thought it was fine, but over the years they have come to realize how very, very wrong it actually is, and it's been very tough for them to come forward and brave of them to give evidence. They've seen her have a brilliant sparkling career, they've seen her be hailed by government for her inspirational position, and I believe that made it more difficult for people to come forward. What are your thoughts on the Lakey's case? I really appreciate your input. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Be a part of the Chris Crime Diaries family and hit the subscribe button now.